Ooh, Elder combos. That's a good one for the Lost combos thing.
Sorry, I had to answer the door. What?
Huh?
Nope.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good to go.
Okay.
So,
Let's start that whole shenanigans over again, yeah?
No, just record it all.
I'm just gonna be playtesting in the background of the video. Anyway, to start with our topics here. Why to play EDH in general, or to go for budget versus cEDH or other things?
welcome to the Elder Brew House. I'm your host, Noble. I'm joined by my co-hosts, JK Dubs and IC Mike. We
Yo,
are discussing the topics of uh, budget cEDH, regular cEDH, Duel Commander, and just cEDH as a whole, and why you should play this lovely format that we have. So, my argument for why we should play budget cEDH is because it allows for high power gameplay at without the restriction of, oh, you're playing against someone's wallet versus you don't own the card. It gives a level playing field for everybody in proxyless tournaments where your budget's set at like $100 to $500, and the gameplay is still relatively equivalent to full power cEDH, just at a later turn, like turn 6 versus turn 4. Plays more into the fact that it's financially friendly to everybody versus uh, the people in proxyless tournaments where proxies aren't allowed. Having the cards versus you not having the cards, like, say, I had a Mox Diamond, you don't have a Mox Diamond, therefore your gameplay is not as optimized as mine is. What it does is it cuts everyone down to a level playing field based on how much the financial restriction is for that budget.
right. If we're going based on budget scales and ranges, I think
Yep.
that's fair. It's not about playing against your wallet because everybody's wallet is theoretically the same.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just based on how you craft the deck with that budget in mind. So maybe your deck is higher power because you're a better brewer versus, oh, hey, I have access to more expensive cards.
Yeah.
That's what makes the format so much fun. Is it's challenging your creativity as a player versus challenging your creativity based on how much money you can spend on a deck.
And I think if WotC actually did create some kind of tournament that took that in mind, that would actually expose a lot of people because if let's say we have a $200 budget range tournament, well, if you put in if you're playing an Esper deck, you put in Godless Shrine, Watery Grave, and Rhystic Study, you're
Right
probably
there's
close
a
to that
quarter of your.
$200
Yeah, you're about at least half of it. You're already
at
screwed on
least.
your lands.
Right, and that deck's not going to be great with two Shocklands and a Rhystic Study. It's probably going to suck. Versus somebody else that actually took the time and sifted through budget cards to make the deck functioning.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge of creativity versus, oh, hey, I can put this money card in there. Like, um, I can guarantee you a duel ruins your budget real freaking fast if you put it into the deck, and it enhances the playability of your deck by basically a negligible amount. Like, that dual land does not necessarily help you play your deck better.
At all. If somebody's playing a dual land in their deck, budget shouldn't even be a word that comes out of their mouth.
That's where we come into the true cEDH, which is budget doesn't matter. Play with your wallet if you feel like it. But the really cool thing about cEDH is outside of tournament play, it's a very proxy friendly environment. Like, people would rather you play proxies than whine about the fact that they have better cards than you because you can't afford them.
100%. I attended an event for Play to Win yesterday, and I think about 90%, if not 100% of the people there were playing proxies.
Like full proxy, or did they have like a set number of proxy cards?
Full
Yeah,
proxy.
really, a lot of those tournaments they allow only like 10 proxies, maybe
Nope.
20.
This was Cloud City Games in Pennsylvania, and they were basically collaborating with uh, Dylan and Cameron from Play to Win for the tournament, which both of them are very pro proxy. So there was no cap on the number of proxies you could use. It was actually better for you if you had the entire deck proxied because they wanted consistency throughout your deck.
Mhm.
So if you had 50% real cards and 50% proxies, if those proxies were a different thickness or whatever, that would have been a problem.
Oh yeah, because of the different feels of the cards and the thickness, you could consider it as marked cards towards a tournament.
Right. So I actually think it's a detriment to those shops that allow you to use proxies, but they'll give you like a 15 card proxy limit
Well, that's the thing.
because
A lot of those ones with the limits, they usually have a judge where they'll actually check every deck before it starts to check if it's
Hmm.
enough. Where you give them a real card and the proxy card, and they'll fill them in the jacket without the jacket until, okay, this card it can't quite make it. You need to swap it for something else.
interesting.
Yeah, I've done a few already, and they've done 10 or 15 proxy limits. I've done one where they had none, but I still only had I think 2 or 3 in the deck just because of the dual lands. Because I don't want to play with dual lands around a bunch of people I don't know, uh, which is an understandable
Um,
reason too for
Yeah, that's
proxy.
fair.
Because
Yeah,
well, that
just like how
one
people don't
kid
like playing with time twisters.
exactly that one kid reaches across the table like, "What's that? I've never seen that," and grabs it with their Cheeto hands. You know, you don't
And
want
God forbid it's the $15,000 card you have in the deck.
exactly.
mhm.
You know,
I
like
I felt zero anxiety handing my deck to my opponent to cut.
I do. I'm not gonna lie. I have.
No, I meant yesterday. All of
Okay.
my entire carrying case is proxies,
Well,
so
yeah.
I
Then
felt
it.
zero anxiety
Well, yeah,
when I
because
went
you
to
just
cut.
whatever they damage the card, you just proxy another one. It's
Exactly.
not like it's make or break.
Yeah. So, anyways, with that whole deal, the tournament. Speaking of, um, we have a specialist here on Duel Commander,
Ew.
and he wants to advocate for why Duel Commander is worth playing, even
So
though it follows a completely different ban list.
So it does follow another ban list, but the average commander player does end up playing dual commander without even realizing it when they're just waiting for a game and it's just them and their buddy 1v1. That's really what it comes down to. It's still singleton, just like commander, but it's a 1v1 format. You start with yourself with your 20 life. Everything else is the same as if you were playing commander outside of the 1v1 rule structure that goes with modern, standard, and everything else. To me, that's a big draw from the people that do play modern, standard, vintage, legacy, and all of the other card formats that aren't EDH. It gives them a stepping stone to get into EDH because they still get their 1v1 format. The rulings are still the same, where, you know, first person doesn't draw, second person draws, no free mull. So it is a little bit more competitive, in my opinion, than even competitive EDH, cEDH, because there's a lot of politics that don't necessarily. Some people make deals and stuff that aren't exactly beneficial to them. People make bad plays for politics because it
Yeah.
might help them later. With Dual Commander, there is no politics. It's that 1v1. So by doing that, they do have their own ban list. They even have a banned as commander list. Um,
Hmm.
their ban list is actually, I believe, smaller than EDH's ban list. It's I think a total of like 97 cards, if I remember right, and it's all of the net positive mana rocks. So you have your Moxes, you have Mana Vault, all of these expensive cards in the EDH format that just bog down decks as well as your budget if you're actually trying to build these things. You don't need them. outside of, they do have like the dual lands and stuff in there. Those can still bog down your pricing, but outside, you're not running 20 artifacts because, oh, I need to have every Mox, Mox Amber, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, Mox this, Mox that, Mox, everything. You don't need those cards in your deck to make them work. They also end up making your decks lower to the ground mana-wise because you don't have all of this ridiculous fast mana. Games go faster.
I was just gonna say that.
It's
Yeah, that's a great
so
point
much
too.
like that. Like I have, some people in cEDH are trying to make Kellen work. The new 2 mana Kellen that came out in what was it?
Telling the kid, the one that came out in Outlaws.
Yeah, the 2 mana one that levels up. That's one that's kind of been seeing some play in cEDH recently, but in Duel Commander, it's a #1 deck. I think it's #1 or #2 right now with Felia following it up. Those two decks, they're monocolor. How often do you see that in EDH that a monocolor deck covers a format?
The only monocolored decks that really have a name for themselves in cEDH at this moment are Magda, Crick,
Yeah.
Yawgmoth to an extent,
And
Selvala maybe.
So here's
I
the
haven't
thing.
seen her in forever, but she sometimes makes an appearance.
Yeah, so a lot of these cards that are like they're really good as in the 99 for normal EDH in Duel Commander, they blow up in the top. Like I could give me a sec. I'll even pull up their top 8 right now. Another crazy one, Aragorn. 3-color Aragorn is absolutely just running the entire meta for them all over the place.
is that the
Really?
4-color one?
The
That's
3-color one,
impressive.
I think it's Jeskai.
Arrow.
The one that came in the pre-con?
King of Gondor.
I thought that was the one that gave you like if you cast a red spell, if you cast
No, that's the 4-color. 3-color
That's
is
the Uniter.
the Monarch one. So the crazy part about it is Aragorn. So right here is the right now majority.
Oh,
They're
nice.
ran by aggro. Aggro is their biggest deck style. Right here, Aragorn, Felia, Kellen, Ketramos. Ketramos is going
Nice.
nuts across everything right now because it is just such an insane card. Right after Ketramos,
It is.
you have Flage.
Ketramos is reputable as probably the turbo Orzhov commander of
It is.
cEDH as of right now.
It is, and here's the thing is, so we were talking with Brad. I was talking with Brad a lot when he was going on about that, and he was playing with Thunder Conductor, and they went through their whole thing. Before, while he was going through that, I literally took his entire deck list, made a Duel Commander version of it, and started playtesting it, and it was going crazy. I ended up just proxying myself the entire deck that I put together using his deck list. Obviously I changed out a bunch of cards because I can't have all of his fast mana, so I had to kind of reduce a little bit of that mana curve and try to make it work within a week.
But you were able to make it work, right?
Exactly. Within a week, it is in the top 5 for Duel Commander. Have you
physically played the deck at Duel Commander tournaments yet?
No Duel Commander tournaments yet. Next Tuesday, I'm actually going to be taking it as my Duel Commander deck to test it at a local shop that does Duel Commander events. They don't do tournaments yet because I'm still trying to help them get Duel Commander off the ground as a tournament format in my area. Duel Commander is a huge
Duel
format
Commander
across the pond.
It is a niche format.
In America, it is. You go and you look at the EU. You go look at.
Yeah, there's a reason it's called French Commander.
Yeah.
It's more across the pond than it is here.
Oh, very much so. It's huge in France, the Czech Republic. There was a recent one here in the States. MagicCon Chicago was actually just here on the 22nd, just a little bit ago. They had a Duel Commander Cup in Chicago on the 22nd of February. Top decks for that, right?
Really?
Here. Yes.
I had no clue that they even recognized Duel Commander at MagicCon Chicago. That's interesting.
Right? They even had a cup for that.
All I've heard is the cEDH community and all of that. Budget isn't even recognized as a format yet.
Yeah.
And I've been
So
trying to get that one off the ground.
yeah, Aragorn took first, Felia took second, Kellen took third and tied for third and fourth with a Marchesa. That's another crazy one. The Marchesa for crimes. And then fifth, sixth, and seventh, or fifth and sixth were both Aragorn. And then Gearson Starn for seventh, and Kellen took eighth as well. And that was just what, a week
Pearson
ago?
Starn, is that the is it
Yes,
pair?
the is it where if you deal 1 damage, it deals 2 extra damage or whatever. Yeah,
I was actually gonna build that as a CEDH deck. That's
it's a
crazy.
great CDH deck. Like there's so this is kind of where I like to show the bridge to people that are like hesitant to do it. That like they play CDH. I'm like, give Duel Commander a try. A lot of the commanders that are just good all arounders, like again Gearson, Kellen, Felia even. I don't know about Felia for CDH, but I have seen it as a niche played deck.
I
A
almost I
lot of
almost
the
wonder if Yawgmoth would be a good dual commander.
um I've
I think it would just
seen
be
people
Kira.
play it, but I wouldn't. I think it's too slow personally for the um format for Dual Commander.
Or 1 versus 1.
Yeah, it's too slow. A lot of the commanders that do really well are the 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, even 4 cost. Once you start getting over that 4 cost, it really starts slowing you down. Like in the top
Yeah.
20, you have Shieldred, you have the new Winter, um,
Wait, so did you say it's 20 life?
20 life. So a lot of burn decks
Okay.
do well. That's why
Oh, so it's a lot
Flage.
faster.
Yeah, so Flage is a big one. The Boros Flage Titan, the Fire's Fury, the one that took off as a lightning helix, as a creature
Yeah.
that you can recur. That's a commander, and that's number 7 on the list right now. I'm looking at the list personally right now. There's also partner decks that take in the top 5. Um, white red for your Boros partners. A lot of people are running that as well with Yoshimaru and God, what's the red guy? I can't remember. Normally I would say Jessica, but they don't use Jessica. They're actually using Bruce Tarl. Bruce Tarl Yoshimaru is number 2 right now for Dual Commander. Normally, normal CDH, people are running Yoshimaru with Jessica because of the rules. You can cast both commanders. So you cast Yoshimaru multiple times, whatever, and you can then cast Jessica. But the partner ruling for Dual Commander is different. Once you cast one commander, you cannot cast the other partner for the rest of the game.
Really?
So,
Even if that one
Oh, that's
dies.
interesting.
correct. It is a weird little ruling. It's to make it a little bit more fair because you essentially, if you're starting your game out turn 1 and you didn't have to mulligan, you're sitting at 7 cards. Well, technically, you're sitting at 9 because you have both your partners available as well. So you can understand how that's kind of game breaking for a 1v1 format. The reason people use Bruce Tarl instead, though, is because Bruce Tarl is Boros already by itself. But if he ETBs or attacks, you have creatures target
Double
creature
strike.
you control get double strike and lifelink, which lifelink is huge as a mechanic for Dual Commander because again, you're starting at 20 life. So things that gain you life, things that gain you card advantage constantly. So like the Monarchy is a huge mechanic that a lot of people use. The Initiative, there's a lot of those cards where you don't really see them played in high powered CDH, but you do see them in some high power EDH decks and a lot of mid power. Those things, because of the Dual Commander, how it's faster paced, you see a lot of those cards actually take off because of the amount of value you get in a 1v1 format is way bigger than you do in a multiplayer.
So on that, real quick, on the commanders, would Kirik not be a viable commander? Or is
Um,
Kirik banned?
let me look. As far as I know, Crick is not banned. But he's not even
And I had a question about another one.
he's not even on the list here, honestly.
Really? What about Feather the Redeemed?
Nope,
Really?
nope. Not even a 0.1% play rate across tournaments. You know what's crazy too? There's some cards that are EDH illegal Golos. That's a big one that a lot of
Yeah.
people just wish would be unbanned. Duel Commander, you're allowed to play that as your commander.
Well,
It's one of the top control decks,
well, that's a reason right there.
right?
Play this.
If you play cEDH and you love Glarb, that is the number 2 control deck right now. You can
Ooh, I have a
easily,
Glarb deck.
exactly. So you can easily take a cEDH deck, swap out. I'm not gonna say 15, 20 cards.
All the fast mana.
It's fast mana, and you can make it playable deck. But obviously, to make it into a viable tournament level deck, you're going to be definitely changing a lot more things than just 15, 20 cards. But you do have your basics. You have your mana. Your mana's already going to be the same. Your mana's not going to change much for your land base. Your creature base probably
Yeah.
won't change much outside of maybe reducing your mana cost to match your reduction in available mana sources. So you do have to take that into consideration, as well as if one thing I've noticed a lot too across Duel Commander decks is you're not running low 30s. You're running closer to 40 lands per deck because you don't have this
Yeah.
fast mana. You know, like right now I'm
So
looking
it's
at
more towards the rule of 43, which is 43 lands in a deck versus
So right now I'm looking at the top Glarb deck right now. I'm pulling up. It is the number 1 Glarb deck right now on the list because I'm looking through MTG top 8. This is what I use to track all of the events and tournaments, and they have all of the metrics. They have all the percentages. Every single deck list that's used. So you can take 3-4 deck lists and see how they differ and figure out which one plays for you. Glarb, 39 lands, 1 MDFC. Just to give you an idea. That's 40 lands. Most people, cEDH Glarb, they're running about 31, 32
So I have a
maybe.
question that kind of branches off that. So, like you said, this is great for people who've never played any commander, right?
It's
this
a good
is
stepping
this is
stone.
a stepping stone.
You also
Right.
learn
Just like
more.
how budget is the stepping stone after Duel Commander, I believe. I
I-
believe budget could be the stepping stone after Duel Commander.
So Duel Commander to me, from what I'm hearing, sounds like it's a great gateway into Commander for someone that's never played Commander. Like, let's say they play Modern
That's
or something.
converting from 60 format to
Yeah.
Commander format. Yeah.
Right.
Because
From any
similar
competitive
play styles is just singleton, and they're still playing with so they're gets people more used to that singleton format, but they still get that high speed competitive feel that modern and standard give them. So it's
So my questions off that are so twofold. Is this viable for cEDH players to get into?
yes.
And do you think that somebody could take somebody that's new, let's say they came from standard, they went into dual commander, they're like, oh wow, I like commander. I like this commander. I like playing EDH as a format. I like this specific commander. Can they take that deck into a full 4-player cEDH pod?
Yes.
You think so?
Most of the dual commander decks, outside of maybe if they just changed out 15, 20 cards, because it's easier to change from dual commander to commander. I have a Quasar deck. I originally it was a cEDH deck. I ended up breaking it down to make Aminatu for cEDH. Both very niche for cEDH. They're I would say fringe commanders. But for dual commander, that Quasar, because it is targeted person, all I need to do really is get 1 or 2 wheels off it, and they're dead. It's a lot faster.
Yeah.
But in cEDH, I used to run that thing. I could easily, oh look, let me entomb turn 1, turn 2 reanimate like a consecrated sphinx, and now I'm just every person's draw. I'm drawing. I have by the time I get to my turn, I'm sitting here with 20 cards in hand, and I literally just changed 4 cards out of that deck from Dual Commander to cEDH, and it's 100% viable.
No, well,
And
that's a good point, but I meant verbatim. The deck list verbatim. Can they just take it from a dual commander
they can be
tournament
competitive.
to a 4-player pod?
They can be competitive. The biggest downside, honestly, from taking a direct dual commander deck and going straight to cEDH is you're competing against a bunch of fast mana that you do not have access to. They will be able to do things faster, more consistently. But if you go against that one guy who does, let me do turn 1 land, Ancient Tomb or whatever, so they already have 2 mana there. Then they go, oh, let me put out a Soul Ring, let me put out a
The one.
the
There
One
you
Ring, and
go.
all these cards that are banned cards in Duel Commander, they'll blow that Duel Commander deck out of the water because the reason they're banned is because they are so game breaking to those Duel Commander decks. So there does have to be some changes. Yes, certain Duel Commander decks can hold their own, but
It seems that the biggest
the
thing
hurdle.
that Dual Commander would essentially have to do to become cEDH viable is just swap out like 7 or 8 lands for the fast mana, and then they'd be able to be viable.
For the most part, but again, it does come down to a lot of these Duel Commander decks. They're lower to the ground mana costs. They don't need that extra mana necessarily to have their deck play. So there
Yeah,
is a discrepancy, but you already have a majority of your deck from Duel Commander to go to cEDH, and for to go from cEDH to Duel Commander, you have a majority.
and this is where I think that argument that budget cEDH is the stepping stone between Dual Commander and true cEDH comes into
Mm,
play, because with budget cEDH, they also have that restriction of the fast mana is not necessarily completely available. They can put like 1 or 2 pieces in their decks versus all of it.
true.
So it's kind of a step into getting into that faster format that cEDH could be compared to Dual Commander when in the 4 player format versus the single player format. Because I think in terms of 1 versus 1, a cEDH deck facing off against a Dual Commander deck would be faster simply because they have access to the fast mana.
Kind of. So one thing I'm sending both of you guys actually right now. So I have loot. I have made it both for cEDH and for Dual Commander. I do this
Okay.
for all of my commander decks. I do a Dual Commander version and a cEDH. That way I'm able to see the differences. For
That's
myself.
kind of like me in budget.
That way I can go, okay, maybe this card doesn't work necessarily here, but like, oh, I really like this card for Dual Commander. And you can see the similarities between my 2 deck lists here, where the certain cards that just work compared to the cards that necessarily don't. And for the most part, the deck, if you look at the deck list, there's maybe 30 cards out of the whole deck that are different because of how I came
It
across
is.
building this deck. Most of my creatures are the exact same outside of a handful because those handful are either banned in normal commander, like Nadu. Nadu is not banned in dual commander. So I can run the Nadu line in my dual commander deck and it goes dumb.
It
But you
is a
take that
total
into you
5 card
can't take that
difference.
into commander, you know?
That is quite a big difference, though.
But
This
you can
it,
see
it
that my land
between
base is almost the exact same. I think it's a difference of maybe 3 lands because I can't run Ancient Tomb. I can't run City of Traders. All of these net positive without the downside of like the bounce lands. You can't run
yeah.
those. If you look at the artifacts, I'm running 12 artifacts, and I had to swap out a lot of those fast manas for talismans. That slows the deck
Hmm.
down a little bit. It is a very consistent deck. I have this built out in paper for Dual Commander. I haven't built it out for multiplayer yet because I don't play it multiplayer very much outside of playing it on Moxfield with friends.
I was about to say that's interesting with this one. You're playing Birthing Pod in the Dual Commander version, but not the cEDH version.
Uh-huh. Because I have more creatures.
Right.
So I'm
Is there
able
not
to
there's
flip
there's no
through my
line
stuff.
you could find in the cEDH?
I could, but I ended up cutting it for other lines that were a little bit faster, like Food Chain. I ended up swapping that for Food Chain personally because I have that Food Chain line with Squee. I don't have that in here.
Interesting. That's banned, huh?
I'm not sure actually if Squee's banned. But
Food chain.
it was a personal choice there. I think Food Chain itself is banned. That is why. So because Food Chain is banned, I go with Birthing Pod because it gives me that extra creatures that can possibly get me higher. Because the win combo for this deck never changed. My win combo is at the end of it, Kinnan, Deadeye, Loot. I get those 3 onto the field, lightning bolt everybody to death. It's just
Right.
a lot faster in Dual Commander. With Birthing Pod, I can go, okay, look, I have, a 4-drop or a 3-drop. I put a 3-drop down, like let's say I put Enduring Vitality. I stack it to the Birthing Pod. I go get myself a Displacer Kitten or a Questing Beast. Questing Beast in Duel Commander is an absolute menace. But then, okay, I'm done with him, and I need to go get my 5-drop. I'll sack him, go get Bone Horde. Bone Horde Dracosaur. I love playing this card in CEDH because nobody ever expects it, and they undervalue it. It is such a value card at the 5-mana level. Like, look, you got beginning of your upkeep. Exile the top 2 cards of your library right there. Faithless Looting on your upkeep. You may play them this turn. If you do, cool. If you don't, cool. But if you exile a land, gives you a token. 3/1. I could Birthing Pod that, go find a 1-drop. Go get myself a Mana Dork. You see what I mean? Like, I still use that line with Food Chain and cEDH, where it's like, cool, I sacked it, now I have 2 mana to cast something. I use them as Mana Dorks, essentially treasures. If you exile an online card, you get a treasure token. I essentially use him as a mana dump, where I can just sit there, and if I can play him out on curve or even before curve because of the fast mana, this guy is ramping me by just sitting there. And flying first strike as a 5/5, that's a menacing card. There's not a lot of flyers that can compete with that in the format. To me, that
There's
is
just
Yeah.
a lot of flyers in Commander in general that people run.
exactly. And the few that they do, first strike, have more than 5 toughness. Come on. This is a card that I took from that's in a lot of Duel Commander decks and went, this is an actual card that is just, it's not like top peak broken. So cEDH just ignored it. A lot of the cards that I play, I love watching when I play a card and people in cEDH are like, what's that card? That to me is my bread and butter of playing the 2 formats, is finding these weird little cards that have really cool things like Wash Away. This is to me a staple
Yeah.
for blue. Every time I play it, they're like, what's that card? 1 mana, counter your commander. Oh, you cast something from exile, 1 mana. If worse comes worse, I cast 3 mana and counter a random spell.
I actually think back to pivot back to what Noble was saying in budget. I actually think that's a perk of budget, because when you put yourself in that restriction of having to stay under whatever amount of money, you can't use certain cards. So you have to find these strange cards that people have never heard of, put in your budget cEDH deck.
Yep. And that's the one thing I do like, trying to get people that are playing cEDH to try these other formats. They're similar enough that they're not going to be lost. But
Yeah.
it gets them to explore new avenues to widen their horizons, which to me personally, cEDH is a very, very stale format in the majority. There are a few people that play fringe decks here and there, but because of the mentality
I'm
of
one of those people.
most of the community, you go to a cEDH tournament, I'm willing to bet over 50% of the decks are the top 4 meta decks. Kinnan, fucking Rogsai, the whole
And the Thrash.
Yeah, exactly. And you might get 1 or 2 of the older meta decks like Crick. I think Crick's definitely fallen down a little
Xur.
bit. Xur.
Okay, I have to stop both of you right now. So I'm just gonna say, in my pod 4, it was a Crick that offered the draw, the first draw that I heard come out of anybody's mouth the whole night, which was interesting because as I was talking to people throughout rounds, everybody was like, "Oh, I got this many draws, I got this many draws," and I'm like, nobody's offered me a draw. Second, there was actually quite a few fringe decks, but there was the meta decks. In one of the pods, I played against 2 Timna Thrasios decks.
Ugh, that sounds painful.
It was painful. It
It
was very
definitely
painful.
sounds painful.
My pod 1 was a slugfest, but I'm kind of grateful that I got that out of the way, because throughout the night people were complaining that, oh, this game was mid-range hell, and I'm just like, well, I already dealt with the stress in pod 1, so
Hopefully
I'm
it's
good.
not there.
But then I saw like Alonis, not the popular Alonis. I can't remember the name of it, but the second printing of Alonis, I think it was. Still Simic, but anyway, yeah, there was a lot of meta decks. There was also a Magda, but the tournament winning deck, ironically, was a Timna Krark list
I've
run by
been seeing that one
Tyler.
pop up.
Yeah, that's not a meta deck by
No.
any means.
But it did take
Interesting.
2 different meta commanders and did stick them back together. So there was a lot of those there. I've been seeing
I
Karkalis
think
with like Sakashima's usually the more common, but that's also another one of those more meta decks. So
Yeah. I think that a lot of the off meta, but still somewhat meta commander decks are definitely taking advantage of what we call brewer's advantage, where the person piloting the deck that built the list knows exactly how the deck is supposed to run, but no one else has ever faced it, so they have that advantage of I've played this deck plenty of times in Goldfish. I know how this deck is supposed to function. I'm going to rely on that to be part of my win con in that no one's expecting how I win to actually happen.
Right. And I think there's a good place for that in cEDH. I think a lot of the
Especially with
tournaments,
the current meta shift
yeah,
from us
also being
losing J-Lo, Mana Crypt, and Dockside.
and Nadu.
yeah.
We don't talk about the Forbidden Bird.
Yeah.
Naughty was stupid.
I know everybody agrees on that one.
But there's definitely things there. Um that like the one that I just like we're talking about the other day, me and Noble, decks that fallen kind of the wayside that used to be an absolute terror in the format. Nekuzar is one we actually tried brewing back up to see if it could compete because the place that one sits perfectly, mid-range hell, which is where the meta is just everybody's stagnating in mid-range hell right now. Having a deck that could possibly break that up could be a thing. Like he's built Nexazar, we're gonna be testing that out here soon enough. Um, and then
It could be, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I do agree that it is mid-range hell, but the problem still lies in that you have to get those pieces out early.
yeah,
Nekasar being 6,
it's
just
painful.
can't do
He's
that.
5.
5
He's
plus you have the
5.
mana
5.
rocks and stuff.
And
You can get him out turn 2 if you got a good hand.
the thing about the Nekuzar deck that me and Mike have been brewing is it doesn't necessarily rely on Nekuzar coming down right out of the gate.
And that was a big
It's
thing I made
meant
a
to
point of.
slow down and get to where we can play turn 5 or turn 6.
If need
We
be.
can play him later if we need to.
And I used a lot of my dual commander stuff that I was like, hey, let's look at this. This card maybe wasn't on your radar that I would use to slow the game down enough to where you're not falling behind necessarily while you're trying to set up, because once you're set up, there's a lot of protection there. There's a lot of pain for other people trying to speed up their game. A big one that we both agreed upon that I ended up putting in my deck that I'm working on, Mendicant, crawling, was it Scrawling Crawler?
Crawling Crawler.
It's not one that a lot of people have been looking at, but it's a colorless, in a way, OBM. It hits you every time an opponent draws a card, it hits them. It doesn't target, so you're a little bit more limited, and it does give people extra cards. But for a deck like Nekazar, where you want to punish them for drawing cards already, so you have Razorkin, Needlehead, you have Shieldred, you have OBM, you're able to punish these people consistently for drawing cards. And with the meta how it is, everybody running blue has the fish. They have the Ristic. They're running
They have
the
the Esper Sentinel.
the Esper Sentinel. They're running everything they can to draw cards, because at the end of the day, the more cards you draw, the more likely you are to win, because you have more chances at answers. Well, all of a sudden now it's like, oh, you want to draw cards here now? Let's let's have you draw 5 cards. Now you're losing 5 life. A lot of these decks that are wanting to draw a lot of cards, they're doing that through that. They're wanting to add nods. They're wanting to use their life total as a resource. You're dwindling that more and more and more and more. And then once they get to that point, I believe we put it in there. Painful Quandary is an insane card. It's a little bit slow, but getting that kind of card out, where now if they want to cast cards, they have to discard those cards that they drew that they tried so hard to draw, or they're eating five health every single time. You're only sitting at 40 life. If you're getting whittled down to 20, 30 life because you're using your life as a resource to either pain lands, to ancient tomb, to these fetches and stuff like that, most people they'll drop themselves to 25, 30 life within the first 2, 3 turns because of these effects. Being able to have something that now puts them on a clock, that kind of card shuts down your storm lines. It shuts down your underworld breach line to a point, and those are big things that people use to win in this meta right now because they're able to get up to that point and then they just throw it their entire deck essentially at everybody to the point where they just win because of the value. Having this 1 or 2 cards in here that just absolutely punishes those things can be game breaking. Another one for me I use in a lot of my white decks now, Suppression Field. Same thing. It adds that tax to all your activated abilities. That kills Planeswalkers for the few that do play them. It kills Kinnan because it gets around his mana generation. That double mana generation doesn't mean shit when you add 2 extra instead of that 1 extra. It makes it a lot harder to pull that infinite mana out because you make 1 extra mana. Well, your Grim Monolith, cool, you have to pay 4. Now you have to pay 6, and it's only generating 4 mana. How are you, 4 or 5 mana? You're not generating enough to go infinite now. These 1 or 2 weird one-off cards that you normally wouldn't see in the cEDH meta, these are cards that I see in Duel Commander, and I play these in all my Duel Commander decks that just curb stomp win cons. And to me, that's why I advocate for people playing these multiple formats because you'll get exposure to all these other cards that you wouldn't normally see, and in my opinion, make you a better Magic player by playing. I even play Vintage. I'm actually doing a Vintage Cube here at the end of the month with a bunch of friends, where I get to play with the top 582 cards in the entire format. That's a whole nother story and a whole nother thing. But by getting access to these cards that you normally wouldn't play, getting access to see these cards. But I was just reiterating my point. The more cards you're aware of and you give yourself the ability to play with, the better Magic player you're going to be, as well as a better brewer. You're going to be able to pick a deck apart because you're going to, everybody's playing this meta deck. And if you can memorize most of that deck, you're like, I know how to beat this deck because of this, this, and this. And if you have 1 or 2 cards in your deck that could just absolutely stomp that entire deck, cool, let me Vamp Tutor for this 1 card that's going to shut off his entire deck, hold up a counter spell to stop him from trying to counter it, because once it's out, that deck has no way to answer it.
Yeah, I also think that budget and Duel Commander can actually make cEDH players better at like threat assessment because they'll find unique interactions with cards that they wouldn't normally play because they have access to the best cards in the game in cEDH, whereas Duel Commander and Budget Commander don't have access to the best cards in the game. They have to do the whole creative critical thinking to achieve the same goals that regular cEDH decks already strive to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And Budget and Duel Commander are less predictable than cEDH is because, as you said, Budget and Duel don't have a meta that is solved. The meta for those is essentially ever changing because there is not necessarily a big enough player base to have found the best, most optimal decks for those formats just yet.
I would say for sure for budget for Duel Commander, there's, for the most part, if you look at their listings, most of them are just old commanders. Yes, there's been some new ones that have broken out, like, and as I had said before, Flage, Ketramos, Felia, Aragorn. That's over a year now, that's been sitting in the top
Larb.
spots. Yeah. Feldon, though. Feldon Ronom Excavator, that came out when? That's in the top, 15 decks, I believe.
Yeah.
It took number 2 at on the 23rd. There was a event over in France, Caen, France. It it got number 2. Feldon. That's an old card. That's a few years
Yeah.
now. Like,
Speaking of older commanders that do well in Duel Commander, I don't know how well he'll do now because he's been kind of overshadowed by power creep and such. The Victus Asmati the Dire. I actually used to play Duel Commander a little bit, and I built a Victus Asmati the Dire deck that
that's old.
to this day is undefeated. To this day, and it's participated in 7 Duel Commander events in my local area. It's undefeated, has won against everybody. Best out of 3, no losses.
That's good. I mean, I don't know how it would compare to some of the new decks now.
Exactly. It's been a few years. I
You
have
would
no
need to
clue how
update
good
it.
it'll be.
I would definitely say you would need to
Most
update
definitely.
it with a lot of the newer cards. There's a lot of interesting new cards that have just broken into it. Like even Hell.
Like Orcus Bowmasters.
Yeah, that's a huge card that has warped
Mm.
multiple formats. That is a multi-format warping card.
I honestly think that he might have a standing in Budget Commander because he's 6 mana, but when he comes down, he's a freaking powerhouse.
Oh yeah.
And not very many players are prepared to face down a 6/6 flying dragon
Very much so.
for anything, really.
So here's something
Especially
funny.
one that goes, oh, I'm going to remove everything, and Brew, you're indestructible because it's sacrifice and it's destroy.
Of course, it might make an upset in the meta if you brought it back. It might, because decks have kind of strayed away from that stuff. Here's something funny that is kind of a link between it. If you wanted to look at the most played cards across all of these different formats, Swords to Plowshares is the #1 card for Duel Commander. I can guarantee you, and even in cEDH, it's in the top 10. It's the best exile kill spell in the game, and it's printed so many times it even falls into budget. Wash Away, it's a cheap counterspell. This is 52% play rate across decks. Only decks that don't run it, ones that don't have blue. Force of Will, not quite budget, but again, every blue deck runs Force of Will.
Yeah. Not to mention, Swords to Plowshares is similar to Soul Ring, and no matter how many times they reprinted it, it's still above $1.
Always.
For most of the printings.
Because it goes in every white deck. If you don't run swords in a white deck, you're not building your deck right. Because that means
or you're running path because you don't have a sword.
Yeah, but it's $1. Come on.
It's $1.
Mental Misstep, another huge banger. It's format wide, both formats. I don't know what its price range is right now for Duel, or not for Duel, for budget, but I'm pretty sure it's not too bad. It's maybe a couple bucks. Lightning Bolt?
It's like 3 or 4, so it's one of the more expensive counters, but it fits into most budget decks.
Yeah. Lightning Bolt.
Lightning Bolt has the Swords to Plowshares Soul Ring thing, where it's still nearly $1 for pretty much every printing.
Because it goes in most red decks. I've actually been hearing a lot of people on cEDH as well going, Lightning Bolt, that's such a bad card. And it's like, it's not. Most creatures have a toughness of 3 or less. Most commanders, toughness of 3 or less. That's a 1 mana kill your commander.
So,
Lightning Bolt essentially says kill target Timna.
Yep. Or Kinnan.
He'll target 99% of things.
Yeah.
So yesterday in Pod 5, and like I've told you, Noble, I'm thankful that I stuck around till the end. Somebody else that we talked to kind of convinced me to play out every pod. Pod 5 went kind of quick, and it was Magda. So Magda won on turn 3 because the Magda player played a Zorn, and he got enough treasures to do the first tutor, got out Zorn, kept tutoring, got out all the pieces, and won. and I was on a Molt of 5, and I
Oh,
felt like
geez.
I had to play. Yeah, and I was on Obnix, so I felt like I had to play Obnixilus on turn 2. So this was me on Obnix, the next player in Timna Jessica. It was Magda, and there was one Timna Thrasios, so there was only one blue deck at the table.
Yeah.
Sounds like a painful
Yeah.
pod.
No, that was actually one of the easier ones because there's no Mystic or Rhystic. There's less Mystic and Rhystic to have to go through. That's what makes the mid-range hell the hell part because of all the triggers.
Yeah.
That and Smothering Tithe. But regardless, since we're on Lightning Bolt, I showed the table after Magda had won. I dropped down a card on the table, which was Lightning Bolt, and I said, I'm sorry I had to play Obnixilus on turn 2 because I could have killed the Zorn and stopped them from winning.
Yep.
But I was tapped out.
Yeah, that's.
So
I
Lightning
mean,
Bolt
that's
has a lot of uses.
hindsight's 2020 is that argument right there.
But it's one of those things where it's just like it could have changed the entire course of a game because of 1 mana for a card that's been reprinted a bajillion times since beta.
And is extremely underestimated.
Exactly. Nobody expects a lightning bolt in the current metas.
The hilarious thing about Lightning Bolt is I actually have it in my Niv Visionary deck because everyone's like, why do you run Lightning Bolt in there? And I'm like, it's not Lightning Bolt, it's Ancestral Recall.
Yeah, at that point it is. Deal 3 damage, draw 3 cards. Insane. Another one that's crazy that's been picking up a lot of traction is Ghostfire Slice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a
that one's one that I actually. Are you guys familiar with the channel That's a Good Card?
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Outside of
well,
monocolor decks, it's a killer card.
well, That's a Good Card. The host of that channel, his name's Kyle. He runs a Corvold deck, and there's actually an active, like, bounty type thing on him, where the goal is kill Kyle with a Ghostfire Slice.
That's fun.
Like, make him lose the game by hitting him with a Ghostfire Slice. I actually have a version of Niv Visionary that's definitely not what you would expect in a cEDH setting that uses Thousand Year Storm, so I can just go Ghostfire Slice, target Kyle with every single copy of it.
There you go.
Just to straight up fulfill that bounty. I don't think it's been done yet because I haven't had a chance to face him with it yet. But anyways, back to the primary topic, which is why we should play these formats. I honestly think that the biggest reason that we should play multiple formats in terms of Duel Commander, Budget cEDH, Brew cEDH, even high power casual, or just regular casual, is it opens up your mind to what's out there. Because cEDH is primarily a solved format as of right now. It is stagnant when it comes to the commanders. We see the same things almost all the time. There are combos out there that are used in Duel Commander that don't even get any traction in cEDH because, oh, there's a better combo. Yes, there's a better combo that everyone's prepared for. That combo that's in Duel Commander, not necessarily prepared for in cEDH because they don't expect it there. Like, I keep advocating for the Forsaken Miner combo.
I love Forsaken
It is an underestimated combo that no one expects in cEDH.
It's
for some stupid reason.
For Duel Commander, it's a huge part of like the Marchesa deck. That's a huge combo in that deck that I've seen go off because that entire deck is targeted. Everything in there targets something. Everything in there is meant to commit a crime to trigger Marchesa. You trigger Marchesa, but commit a crime. Forsaken Miner, oh, you committed a crime, bring it back. Use it as a sack outlet.
Yeah, and here's the thing. In cEDH, there's tons of ways to make infinite black mana so that you just straight up aristocrat someone out of the game.
Yep.
Or the whole table out of the game with a Blood Artist and a Forsaken Miner.
Yep. all of
And
the
there's like 5 or 6
altars.
blood artist effects.
There's even the ones that hit the whole table at the same time instead of target player. You know, you have
Yeah, but
Zulaport.
those won't trigger. Those won't trigger Forsaken Miner because they aren't committing a crime.
Correct. But
It's
if you
funny that they're
have
hitting
them,
everybody and they're not committing a crime.
but if you have both of them out, it expedites things. And then there's even the damage multipliers where it's like, oh, if you would deal damage to an opponent, deal double damage. If you're in red, you have, if a source you control deals damage, let's double it, let's triple it, fuck it. But then you have
Yeah,
the black ones where it's like, oh, you dealt damage, let's gain you life. Oh, you gained life, kill your opponent. Like,
yeah.
you know, for these
A lot
drain
of hard
effects.
combos in CEDH.
One combo that I'm sorry, you were saying something, Dub.
No, I was just saying there's a lot of 2-card combos in CEDH, yes.
Yeah.
One that I have not seen that definitely needs to make a comeback is either Duskmantle Mage and Mindcrank, or Blood Chief Ascension and Mindcrank.
Blood Chief does see some play.
That combo used to rule the format before the power creep.
It
And
does.
honestly, it's a combo that not a lot of players actually prepare for anymore because it has been power crept out of the format. I think a lot of these power crept cards, like these combos that have been power crept out, they are underestimated combos at this point because they have been power crept out by like Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. Sure, that is a very surefire way to win. However, a lot of people have been complaining, oh, Thassa's Oracle is such a boring way to win. Bring back the old combos. Bring back Blood Chief Mindcrank. Bring back Duskmantle
I'm
Mindcrank.
actually on the same page as you, to an extent.
Sedgemore.
I really. What's that?
Sedgemore with Chain of Smog.
Sedgemore. Yeah. I
Witherbloom.
actually really like Blood Chief Mindcrank. But somebody, when I met up with Celestial, Matt, when I first got there, his friend Zach was there. Told him I was playing Obnix. He asked me what I was on, blah, blah, blah. He asked me if I was on Blood Chief Mindcrank. And I said no. So we started talking about it for a minute. And it just takes too long in this meta.
Yeah.
Yes, it's mid-range hell.
Takes 3
and
turns to get it
takes
going.
3 turns to even turn on.
That's why.
Yes, it kind of suffers from the max speed type thing. However, my argument for the Blood Chief Mindcrank is it's actually quite easy to trigger because it doesn't take 3 turns.
You can get it in one
It
turn
It
cycle.
actually doesn't.
If you can. If you can.
If your deck is built specifically to do what the Blood Chief wants you to do, it's very easy to get it active in one turn cycle.
But
Yeah.
then in my mind, if you have a commander that's built to do damage in some type of way that would turn on Blood Chief earlier, then you should just be going all in and winning with your commander.
And
You
burn.
shouldn't be worrying about Blood Chief.
I mean, you can run Blood Chief as a backup.
You can, but if you're saying that your commander,
Well-
you get your commander out early, you play Blood Chief, and your commander deals 2 on each upkeep or something, well, you should find ways to abuse that and just win with that.
My answer to that, Sulfuric Vortex triggers Blood Chief Ascension every upkeep.
Yep.
And it's not a commander.
It is 1 card extra to the combo, but it guarantees it.
Like I said, I'm on the same page with you. I just don't think the current meta can support it. I wish it could. I wish
Maybe not, but I was just using Blood Chief as an example of some of these lost combos.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
another good
one is like Gwyn Bond Exquisite Blood. I used to play that all the time.
That's an expensive combo to pull off now in the meta, though.
10 mana.
There is the creature versions of it, so you can cheat it out with reanimations. So if you do run a reanimator package, you can reanimate both of them. I almost put them in my Amanatu deck just because they're both enchantments and I can surveil them, or you can reanimate those.
Yep.
Or, like, for me, I'm
Vito and that new vampire that has the Exquisite Blood stapled onto it.
Exactly.
Right?
So, yeah.
And I think,
So you could run a reanimator package. Like, I'm surprised I don't see it in Crick decks, honestly, because they're reanimator hell. or cheating shit
Honestly,
out.
I think Marin should be. I think Marin or Grist should be on them because they're Reanimator decks.
Yeah.
Those are Reanimator decks.
Same with my Amanatu. I don't run it just because I have so many other good things to run. I do run a Reanimator package, and I've been tempted to throw that combo in there because it's not a hard combo to pull off, especially when my commander itself shoves 2 cards into the graveyard. And I can miracle out that, Sanguine Bond for 2 mana. And now all of a sudden, that's a 2 mana combo where I'm like, cool, let me reanimate the creature or reanimate Veto or whatever. Veto's not expensive to cast. And then I can miracle this thing off the top. Or if it gets thrown into the graveyard, I run Replenish. I can bring my entire graveyard's worth of enchantments back with 1 card. And I just hold up counter spells in its place just to hold it, because once people see that combo's in the graveyard, people worry, because there is ways to bring stuff back. Like I can do Hall of Heliod, put it on top of my deck at end step, and then I go to draw it and miracle it out. And then all I need to do is deal 1 damage and the table's dead. But for that deck, I run more the Hoarding Brood Lord combo because that's just more consistent.
Yeah, I was just giving an example of an older combo that has kind of been pushed out of the format.
That's the thing, is like that's a commander that actually makes that old combo a lot more viable than it is in any other deck, because I have that ability.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and in that deck, you could go for it, and you'll win some games with it.
Yeah.
In the majority of decks, though, I don't think so.
No. Unless you have a way to cheat it out, it's too slow because of the mana costs. 10 mana is way too much for a combo.
Right.
To hold up mana for counter spells or anything else. There's only so many free counter spells. Oh, speaking
But anyways,
sorry, real quick. You mentioned Lannis earlier. Was it Cryptozoologist? Because that one is on the top. It's in the top decks.
Oh, no. It was the Genetics Expert.
Oh, okay.
So that's a fringe deck. Like we were talking about before, that's a fringe deck. I've never seen that card before in my life.
Yeah, the 2 mana one from Modern Horizons 2 is the one that... This one could even be a budget deck because Lannis himself's 25-cent card. You could make it like... I'm looking at this deck list right now, and most of the mana or most of the money that is in this thing is in like 6 cards. Legolas's Quick Reflexes, Green Sun Zenith,
we can actually look into doing a brew session on this and making a deck tech episode for the channel on Lannis. Like start going into these obscure commanders that could go into a budget. A budget competitive.
Yeah, for like Lannis, I'm looking at it right here. It's not in the top like 10 for aggro, but it is on the list. It's got a 0.3% play rate, which, I mean, it's showing up at tournaments. So it's not necessarily a bad card if you're getting to the tournament level. I just wanted to bring it up because I was still looking through the list and it was brought up.
I do think that one series for this podcast will definitely be Lost combos, because I think we could find some Lost combos that definitely deserve a shout out, and for how they terrorized the meta back in the day, and potentially how they could see a resurgence back into the meta, depending on the commanders that we look into around them. Yeah. Like, for example, Nekizar and his whole deal of being able to run the Duskmantle Mindcrank. That's an instant speed. You don't have to wait X amount of turns or depend on a turn cycle for it. And it fits really well into Nekizar's game plan already in terms of resource denial. Like, I do believe that we put the Bloodteeth Mindcrank combo into Nekizar, right? As an A and B combo in case Nekizar gets hated out of the game.
I would. It's a backup. If Duskmantle Mindcrank is the main win line, then yeah, you would play Bloodchief.
Because we were exploring A and B combos that Nekizar used to run back in the day when commander damage was any damage that the commander dealt that was tracked. Because that is where Nekizar was the terrifying boogeyman that he was back in the day.
And we kind of came up with for him being kind of a boogeyman now with poison because of the new, like, how rules have changed. Because Nekuzar is the one that deals the damage, give him infect.
Yeah.
And now your upkeep, cool. You go to upkeep, you go to draw, you draw 2 cards. You're taking 2 poison counters. That puts you on a very fast clock to die.
You know, you could even do in that deck. You could play because is that on up. Well, it wouldn't matter if that's on upkeep, but you could play that blue enchantment that gives you another beginning phase.
I don't know if I can't remember if it's upkeep or draw. I think it's on draw. You just draw an extra card. But with
I'm pretty
the
sure it's the entire beginning phase. Like you get the untap upkeep draw.
to give an extra draw again, where it's they don't take the poison from that if Nexazar's not out. But if you have Nexazar out, we even threw on their Isochron Tainted Strike, so you can consistently put Tainted Strike onto Nexazar. And then if you want, you can even swing it at people and just kill them out with poison, which poison's stupidly fringe. I think outside of maybe a Finn deck, nobody runs poison. But with some of the newer cards that's come out in the last few years,
one deck that is looking into running. Well, actually, there's 2 decks. Ironically, they're both Final Fantasy commanders.
interesting.
Yestola and Titus.
So we're gonna get more
Yestola and
infect,
Titus
or are they running toxic?
They are looking into infect as the method of winning, because Yestola deals 2 damage. She deals damage. She doesn't cause loss of life. That's what a lot of people have been mixing up. Is her effect is damage, not loss of life.
Yeah.
They're comparing her to Talion, which is loss of life.
That's pretty cool.
And the discords that I've been in that have been brewing Yestola have been looking into infect as the viable way to have her win faster, because she is an extremely slow deck. I have watched 6 gameplays of Yestola as playtest gameplays, and I've seen her win 1 game out of all 6. I have not seen her win any of them, other than the 1 game where infect was what mattered.
Yeah. So that's the weird thing too with infect is like it's a great mechanic for multiplayer. You throw infect into Duel Commander, it's like what's 10 versus 20? You're splitting hairs at that point. It's actually harder to deal 10 infect than it is to just burn somebody for 20 damage.
And the card quality goes down tremendously because those cards usually aren't very good.
Outside of weird interactions, like that's why I was bringing up the Isochron, being able to reapply it over and over again without using some of the worst cards for infect and stuff like that, like grafted exoskeleton. You stick that onto a creature, you remove the exoskeleton, so they blow up your artifact, it kills your creature.
Mm-hmm.
That, like,
also,
if you have a way to protect the artifact itself as well as the creature, it's not a bad card. But now you're committing too many resources
into protecting 1 card, which is the biggest problem. I would much rather protect my Isochron Scepter than I would my grafted exoskeleton.
Correct, because Isochron,
Isochron Scepter has more utility. Isochron has more utility than exoskeleton does.
Yeah, because you don't need to put Tainted Strike on there. You can throw a counterspell under there. Now you have a fucking counterspell on a stick. Or you could do the
Outlaws of Thunder Junction card that I can never freaking remember, that you were like, hey, I like copying my Isochron Scepter.
3 steps ahead. I love that card as a counterspell, but the silly jankiness of rulings. I actually got into it with a judge about this, and I had 2 judges actually agree to it. Isochron Scepter only looks at the face value mana of the cards. So these spree cards, all of them are 2 or less. 3 steps ahead is 2 blue mana, and then when you go to put it on the stack, because of the spree itself, it requests you pick one and then pay that mana cost. So when you go to put it on the stack, then it adds whatever one you picked, and you have to pay that mana for it to go to resolve. You're able to get around the initial cost of it in a way.
It's just like any of those cards that say, as an additional cost, do this.
Yep, because the spree is considered an additional cost.
That is pretty neat. I'm not sure how viable that would be, because those cards are usually, the initial cost is usually 1.
Some of the better ones are 2. Like 3 steps ahead is 2. There's a couple that are good ones, but most of them are 2. The red ones
Okay.
that are used.
Insatiable Avarice is one of those very good ones that is 1.
Yeah, the white one.
Right. So if you still have to pay the extra, does it help? Yeah, it does, but it doesn't make a huge difference.
But it gives you the flexibility of that card. So, like, there's the white one
Right.
where it's a board wipe. You can constantly have a board wipe available. You can
It
have.
gives you the
Yeah.
repeatability of
Yes.
yeah. So you don't have to make the choice of, okay, well, I have this lively dirge. Do I wanna tutor and entomb, or do I want to reanimate something? Well, I can reanimate something this turn and then tutor next turn.
Yep.
And you can reuse it. So now it's a value piece because you're getting way more value out of it. If you're able to use that stick more than once or twice, you're able to go, look, that 2 cards now has essentially generated me the value of 2 cards, 3 cards, 4 cards. You know what I mean? That's something that can definitely help expedite your game plan. The reason I brought up three steps ahead specifically is because you can, it will be 5 mana to do this, but you do 2 mana, tap it, and then for 3 colorless, so it doesn't matter to what colors you have, you can make a copy of another target artifact. You can copy the Isochron Scepter itself. Make another Isochron
You could copy
Scepter.
a Mana Vault.
Yeah.
You could make a Mana Vault. You could make a
rocks
Grim Monolith.
and ramp yourself way past everybody.
That's a very good point.
So it's these weird niche
You
things.
could copy a Portal to Phyrexia.
That'd be dumb. But or if you need to reset your One Ring, copy the One Ring. You don't get the ETB cast trigger, but it gets rid of those counters that could have possibly killed you. Something like, oh, they're gonna destroy something on the stack. You tap it, and it casts the spell. You make a copy of it before they destroy it. Like, oh, they're gonna kill my, they're gonna destroy my mana rock, so I can't cast things. Well, let me make a copy of it real quick.
Or, God forbid, I'm going to destroy your Isochron Scepter. Okay, in response, I'll copy my Isochron Scepter. I'll get another value piece out of it versus you just destroying my Isochron Scepter and me not having access to it ever again.
Yeah, you do lose the original piece, but at the very least, you're able to go, well, I'll just do something else with it.
Yep. Like, oh, hey, instead of, you didn't like me copying my Isochron Scepter, well, now I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put a counterspell under it, and now you've got to deal with me being able to counterspell all your stuff.
And then you do things like Training Grounds where now it's free. Or, well,
Yeah.
1, because you can't reduce it past 1. Now it's 1 less mana, which is silly, which I actually was thinking of throwing that on that Nekuzar deck.
There's a lot of good reasons to look into these cards. I think that's a benefit of playing budget and Duel Commander because of the card pool. It's not so stale or restrictive as cEDH.
cEDH isn't actually that restrictive. It's just a matter of, efficiency. How efficient is this combo versus other combos? Now, that's where a lot of people fall into the pitfalls for cEDH is they're like, oh, I've got to run the most efficient combos because this is how this deck wins all the time. Put in a different combo. Everyone will be like, oh, you're going to be on Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation. Nope, I'm on Bloodkeep Mindcrank. That is exactly what we are doing with Nekuzar. Everyone's going to be like, oh, you're on Oracle Demcon. No, we are on a different plan altogether. We don't even have those cards in the deck. Everyone assumes, oh, you're in black-blue, you're going to be running Oracle Demcon.
Yeah, and they go
Praetor's Grasp, find out we don't even have that.
Like, they have Demonic or Thassa's in hand, and they go try to find your other piece from you, and they just go, oh, it's not here. Now they have to find something else.
Or they Praetor's Grasp, they see you don't have Oracle Demcon in your deck. They'll be like, they'll give the table the information of, oh, they have Oracle Demcon in hand, they're going to win. And then they find out we don't have that. That's what I think a lot of the assumptions when it comes to any blue-black deck that we run that doesn't run the Oracle combo, that runs one of these lost combos that we're discussing.
Trista deck.
I think that's what a lot of it's going to have happen is we're looking for Oracle Demcon. They have it in hand because we can't find it in the deck. And then they have the fear of, oh crap, if we don't try to go for our win attempt now, they're going to win on their turn. So everyone uses all their interaction trying to stop their win cons.
And
And we just sit there like,
yeah, and then you just chill.
that's honestly one way that I think that this is going to go once we start exploring these lost combos is people are going to kind of start, if they decide to listen to our podcast, they're going to start actually looking for these lost combos because they're going to be like, look, they don't have Thoracle Demcon in the deck. What other combos are they running? And then that'll get people that are new to cEDH that have never seen these combos thinking about these combos because they've never seen them in cEDH because they just started like 2 or 3 months ago. Or even 2 or 3 years ago because a lot of these combos stopped being played before 2 or 3 years ago.
But yeah, no,
What's
like
that?
we definitely we'll definitely start to try to show off our brews here. Maybe in this next time, we'll show brews off, show these weird interactions, these weird combos, to show that they are possibly viable. See if we can even maybe get somebody that's breaking out with some of these newer decks like Ketramos. See if we can get B-Rat to come down and play one, and we can show how our deck brews might be able to compete with these new meta
The
decks.
tested decks.
And they're tested, yeah, they're definitely tested. There's a lot of people in communities right now that are just blowing through these decks, blowing through competitions with them because they are new, but they're so powerful that they could not be ignored. And people are already picking it up and seeing what's getting put down. And the funny thing about
Like
it is,
Hackathon, Ketramos,
yeah, those
Mid Visionary on a lesser extent, but
yeah, but they were cards that the moment
these
they were
decks are all
announced, people were like,
powerful.
that's a broken card because it uses a lot of the combos that are already in the meta. So it wasn't necessarily something new, it just made what was already there more broken. But you have some people that are brewing it like B-Rad, where he is pulling cards from Odyssey, cards from Tempest that people are like, I would have never used that card.
Confessor.
You know?
Confessor.
Yeah.
Who the hell has ever seen that in cEDH? And it's in that deck.
Exactly. And he had that knowledge.
Planar Void.
Planar Void, I see some play in some Exile decks, but it's a powerful card that sees play here and there. But other cards like that Confessor, that's a huge one where it's like, what? You go look at the price on that thing, it's like a 12-cent card.
Children of Corliss. That does not see play in cEDH. It's in that deck.
In some decks. Some
In the
Adnaz
fringe
decks.
I have not seen an Adnaz deck in a long time, I will be honest.
Oh, I see them all the time.
Children of Corliss is a card that I have actually never seen played in cEDH since I have not seen Adnaz in forever. I haven't seen Adnaz since I got back into cEDH, actually.
It is in Ketramos.
Yeah.
It is 100% in Ketramos. When B-Rad mentioned Children of Corliss, I was like, that is a card I have not seen in forever. And then he mentioned Tireless Tribe, and I'm like, I had no clue that was even a card. He mentioned a lot of cards that it's like, these do not see play. And I actually...
And the thing is, those cards are outside of that deck, 90% of them aren't going to see play in any other deck. But because of what that deck wants to do and how that deck plays, they synergize. And it was because he came at it from a different point of view than every other cEDH player. He was able to pull these cards that haven't necessarily seen the light of day in a long time and made them a viable card for a viable deck. And I think if more people actually took to brewing these fringe commanders, they could find these synergies that just break the deck harder than they were already gonna be with the meta.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've noticed a lot of brewers don't do, is they don't do the deep dives that some of these commanders require. Like Hashaton. Hashaton requires discard outlets, and Tireless Tribe. As soon as B-Rad brought up Tireless Tribe, I was like, you know what, that's going in Hashaton because I can't believe I missed that card. It's so much better than Narcomoeba and Aramoeba. Hands down, it is better because it's 1 mana, just discard a card. And you get to keep your sack outlet because it doesn't die to OBM.
Yeah.
Unlike Putrid Imp, which dies to OBM. But on the flip side of that, these deep dives, I have noticed that high synergy sometimes just outdoes meta decks. High synergy with commanders can take wins when it comes to tournaments. Like my Niv Visionary deck takes wins when it goes into these tournaments, these local like cEDH proxy tournaments that I'm allowed to do outside of my main LGS. It's able to take wins in those metas because it is extremely synergistic. It does not rely on just my commander. That's what a lot of people have fallen to, is that their decks rely so heavily around their commander outside of like Oracle combo, because that doesn't require your commander. Your commander just gives you an outlet to get there faster sometimes. But a lot of these other decks that can't rely on the Thoracle combo, they rely on their commanders so heavily that if you hate the commander out of the game, they just fall flat. They do nothing. And that's one thing that the current meta has an issue with, is they're so heavily reliant on their commanders that as soon as you shut down the commanders, the decks don't run. A Draenith, there's a reason that Draenith is hated so freaking much, and it's because it shuts down
Most decks.
commander-centric decks.
Yeah.
It shuts down commander-centric decks because turn 1 Draenith equals nobody's playing commander but me.
Right. Yeah.
It
Draenith
shuts
is-
down breach decks. It shuts down commanders altogether. It shuts down any deck that relies on cards being exiled and then playing those cards from exile, like Obnixilis and Rakdos the Muscle. Those decks hate Draenith.
Yep.
And a lot of people do not run enough redundancies to take care of the problem cards that shut their decks down. They
Yeah.
focus on, oh, hey, how do I stop this person from doing this if they run this specific deck? What you need to do is be prepared for, okay, this deck specifically causes a problem that makes it to where I can't play my game plan. I need to be prepared to be able to take this deck down on my own if I have to.
I agree, and Draenith is definitely one of those cards in that restrictive card pool that I was talking about before. So if you do enjoy fringe decks or the budget decks, or you just hate Draenith, that is also another reason to look into Duel Commander or budget cEDH, so you can kind of bypass that restrictive card pool, find these other cards that are worth playing, and surprise some people. On that note, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. We can explore those fringe commanders in other videos.
I agree. We've gotten pretty far into the discussion of why these formats are worth playing, because all of them have pretty unique interactions within themselves. We can explore each of these formats more extensively as we grow this channel and get more into what decks do what in which format.
I think those are some excellent reasons to look into Duel Commander and Budget Commander. So if you like that, stick around, subscribe for more, and
Do some
we
gameplays.
will. Yeah, we'll get some gameplays, deck techs, more podcasts. Got a lot of stuff coming in the future. So, on that note,
Deck yourself before you deck yourself.